Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here in the New York City studio, and we are talking about siblings never to be forgotten. 9/11 siblings speak about their grief journey 20 years later. And this is such an important topic because we are coming up on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And sibling loss is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm actually looking forward to talking to these two siblings today because my brother died in a car accident at the age of 17. And that profoundly changed my life, and it's why I do the work I do today. So welcome to the show, Kathy Ong Herrera and Jim Giacconi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Like I said, it's great to have you on today. I think there's not enough shows on sibling loss, and it is such an important and relevant topic. So I'm going to quickly introduce you, and then we'll start talking about sibling loss and what your last 20 years have been like on your own journey. We'll start with Kathy. Kathy Ong Herrera is the sister of Betty Ann Ong, an American Airlines flight attendant who made a 23-minute phone call to American Airlines operations staff calmly describing what was happening on Flight 11, which ultimately flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 20 years later, Kathy continues to speak about her loss, her journey, and the positive work of the Betty Ann Ong Foundation in honor of Betty's heroism and memory. Kathy is the founder and CEO of the Betty Ong Foundation. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Kathy Ong, and I am the sister of Betty Ann Ong, and she was a flight attendant on American Airlines Flight 11 that crashed into the North Tower on September 11th. And how I found out that morning was I was awakened by a phone call from my brother who lives in San Francisco. And it was early in the morning, and he said to me, "Do you have your television turned on?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Turn it on because there's a historical event taking place, and I think you should watch it." So from each of our homes, we turned our TV on, and we were on the phone the whole time with each other. And all we saw were planes repeatedly being crashed into the North and South Tower. And I could see people on the street looking up at the buildings, the burning buildings, people hanging off to the sides of the building, some falling out of the building, and people staring up into the sky, into the buildings, just with bewilderment in their face. And so right about that time, my brother said to me, he asked me, he says, "Where's Betty?" Betty and I had a very close relationship that I knew where she was every day. We talked to each other every day, either by phone, or if she was nearby, I would go down and spend the day with her, sometimes spend the night with her. And so I said to my brother, I said, right about now, Betty should be on her way to Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was going to meet with her that afternoon because we were going to talk about our upcoming sister trip to Hawaii the following Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I could hear concern in his voice as he told me that he thought he heard that the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center originated from Boston. And right at that moment, my heart sank.
Wow.
And we both decided to hang up our phones and call my sister. And my brother was going to call American Airlines. And so I called Betty, and her cell phone, I received a busy signal. And that really gave me hope that she was okay. Mm-hmm. And she was trying to reach us to tell us that she was okay. And she normally calls me when she arrives on a trip to say, "I'm here." And after some time, I kind of thought, well, maybe the lines are just busy and she's not able to get through. Throughout the day, I didn't hear from her. And so my brother had been in contact with American Airlines. And in the beginning, they said, no, she wasn't on the flight. But I kind of felt like I needed to be in San Francisco with my family. So my brother and I were in contact the whole time while we were going up there. I live about 4 hours from San Francisco. And about 8 o'clock in the evening, my brother called me and said American Airlines had confirmed that Betty was on the plane. And we were about an hour outside of San Francisco. And I told my husband, I said, I need to get out of the car. I need to get out of the car. And he pulled out off the freeway and we went into the parking lot of, I think, a shopping mall it was. And I just stared up into the sky and I just was shouting, why? And I was just so shaken.
That's
And,
that's
you
that's a
know,
very, yeah, that's a very traumatic story, and I was struck by the fact, by your story of your sister and how calm she was that day. I mean, I can only imagine what must have been going on in her own head
yes,
as a flight attendant on that plane. So that is that. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's my heart goes out to you. My
thank
heart
you.
really goes out to you to have a sister that you know is your best friend, and then suddenly she's no longer here. And unfortunately, Jim, who is also joining us today, is no stranger to having a sibling die in 9/11. Jim Giacone's brother Joe was killed in the September 11th attacks. He was the vice president at Cantor Fitzgerald's E-Speed division, and his office was on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center. Jim found a way to honor his brother by becoming a mentor with Tuesday's Children to two young brothers who lost their father in 9/11. Jim serves on Tuesday Children's Mentoring Advisory Board and leads tours at the 9/11 Tribute Museum, where he shares his brother's story and his own. Jim was a finalist for the NASCAR Humanitarian Award in 2016 for his many years of service as a mentor to Tuesday's Children. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your brother Joe?
Yeah, my brother Joe was 43 years old. And I just had this realization the other day. He was my big brother. You know, he was always 3 years older than me. And he was 43 when he was killed. And I just, for some reason, it struck me this year that I am 17 years older than when he was killed.
Wow.
It was I don't know, just the math of it just hit me like a big slap in the face. He was always my older brother, and now I am 17 years older than him. It's just a realization that was just a cold slap in the face. I just felt the need to add that. But my brother, he was a father of two. He was a great cook. I was a better golfer.
I love it.
But, you know, when either of us heard a joke, the first person we'd call was each other. There was many times I was driving into Manhattan to do work, and I would call him and he'd tell me to come, you know, visit and have lunch with him. But, you know, how life gets in the way, and how many times I wish I could have said, yes, I'll have lunch with you. But those are regrets that can't be going back on.
Well, and like you're pointing out, we assume that our siblings are going to grow old with us and be in our lives forever.
Yeah.
So it is jarring that you are 17 years older than he was, and he's your older brother, and that he is no longer here.
Yeah, and he was 43, and I'm 60 now, and it's just.
So Jim, take us back to that day, because I do know that when you found out that your brother was missing, didn't you get a firefighter uniform, or you went down there to look for him, didn't you?
Yeah, not that day. It was a few days after. I immediately tried to gain access, but was turned away again and again because too many people were volunteering, and it would become too chaotic. A friend of mine was a firefighter up in Harlem, and I met him at his firehouse, and I dressed in his bunker gear, and we went in, and we were waved right in. And yeah, I went to the pile, and you know, even up to those days, the experts on TV were saying that the way that the towers came down, there was bound to be voids, and there was a possibility of finding survivors. And I had no training whatsoever. And as soon as I got to that pile, I knew my brother was never coming home.
Wow. So you had a gut feeling, and you just knew he was gone.
Yeah, no, it was an unsurvivable. It was, it made me physically sick when I got down there. It's indescribable. There is no words that I could use to describe it, but it was complete. It was just dust and fire and smoke and concrete and steel, and it was only 80 feet. Those towers were over 1,300 feet in the air, and it was only 80 feet, and it was not survivable.
Wow. Well, listening to you and Kathy, you've both been through unimaginable loss of your siblings. How, for both of you, this question is, how do you get through that? How do you find hope? How do you go on after this kind of trauma, this kind of traumatic loss?
Well, it's been a pretty long journey, and there have been a lot of good moments in our family, new babies, weddings and graduations, and events like that. We miss Betty, but you see that there's new growth and there's new life. And I founded the Betty Ann Ong Foundation, and when I created it, I wanted to mirror who Betty was in her love for children and senior adults, which is who we work with now through our foundation. We also have a recreation center named after Betty in San Francisco, and it's the Betty Ann Ong Chinese Recreation Center. And it was rebuilt in 2014, and so San Francisco and the mayor decided that they were going to want to name it after her. And the wonderful thing about that is that as children, we used to play there, and so it has a lot of meaning. Our family finds a lot of peace being volunteers and working at the rec center. And so it's been very helpful to be able to work through the foundation of facilitating programs and helping children and senior adults. I think one of the things that I learned after Betty's death is I have no regrets, because every day when I talk to Betty, we always ended our conversation with "I love you lots."
Wow.
And so it's been very healing in that way, and our family is very close. I also find a lot of comfort in speaking about Betty, and it's been very healing for me to be able to do that, because it's like an outlet.
Well, I love the idea of a playground in San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco for 5 years. I went to University of San Francisco. And I love the idea of a playground with children playing that's named after your sister who loved children.
Yes.
That is a beautiful vision. So,
Thank you.
yes, it sounds like you're doing much work in her honor and in her memory. Thank you.
Yes.
And what about you, Jim?
Well, the first few years were where it was just a fog.
Yeah.
It just trying to deal with all the aspects of his death and his absence.
Yeah.
And in 2006, I came upon, I wanted to find a way to honor him. And I came upon Tuesday's Children. And Tuesday's Children gave me a way, if it's even in a small way. I mentored the two boys. They were 8 and 6 at the time when I started with them. And I did things with them that me and my brother loved to do together.
I love that.
And in a small way, a little part of Joe was rubbing off on these boys. And that also became a form of therapy for me. I would come back with a sense of calm after I was with the boys. It's always tough to carve out a 4-hour or 6-hour block of time. I have 3 kids of my own. But I would always feel a sense of calm when I was on the way home. It was a form of therapy. And then in 2009, I came upon the Tribute Museum. And, I noticed after September 11th, even when I was talking to my friends, that how uncomfortable the conversation was for them. So I stopped talking about Joe. And the Tribute Museum was an outlet. I found a voice that I didn't even know I had. And I was able to talk about Joe and September 11th to people who were there to listen. And that person to person story is a very powerful way to communicate with these people. They can go to statues and memorials, but if you actually hear a person who lived through it tell you their story, I am very confident that it makes a lasting impression. It's a pathway from the brain to the heart, and that memory lives on. And that's a way I get to make sure that Joe is never forgotten, because we never got any remains back of Joe. So by me doing those tours and speaking, and I frequently go to, I just did the other day, I go to the side of the memorial pool where his name is. And if people saddle up next to me, I engage them in conversation, and I talk to them about the area, and then I tell them about Joe. And it's really powerful, and it's a form of therapy. And that's been my savior.
And I have to say, Jim, I went down to the memorial site and took your tour and brought some friends of mine that had a child and a sibling die, and we were all profoundly moved. You know, like you said, going down there and hearing a personal story about somebody that had a family member die, you know, on that hallowed ground is very, very powerful. So
Yeah.
I love that you're doing that. I feel like it's therapeutic for you, but I feel like it's therapeutic for those that are taking your tour also.
The response is really positive all the time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, for those that don't know about Tuesday's Children, can you tell us a little bit about what Tuesday's Children is?
Sure. The Tuesday's Children was born in the days after September 11th. Their immediate goal back then was to be advocates, to be a support for some of the over 3,000 kids who lost a mom or dad on that day. And over the years, they developed many great programs, mentoring programs, which I am part of, and also the program for, now you're going to have to edit this because I just drew a blank.
Common Bond? No.
Common Bond, thank you. They also have a program called Project Common Bond, where they bring these kids from all over the world. It started just as Tuesday's Children kids, but they've opened it up, and it's worldwide. Kids come together and talk about their loss or effect they had from terrorism. And it's a very extremely powerful and positive meeting that they have. They have usually it's a 3-day meeting, and it's come full circle because some of the kids that were participants in the earlier years are now coming back as counselors or chaperones for other kids that are coming down, because there'll always, unfortunately, be more kids affected.
Right.
And now Tuesday's Children also has pivoted to helping the military. They have a mentoring program, which I am also going to be part of, and they're there for support of widows and the military.
That's wonderful, especially given what just happened with the 13 Marines being killed. Thank you, Jim, for everything you're doing for Tuesday's Children. So, Kathy, I was wondering, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. There's a lot going on around it. There's a lot of media around it. There's a lot in the news, as I'm sure you know. What is that? Tell me about what that brings up for you, or where you are 20 years later.
20 years later, I think that, like I had mentioned, there's been a lot of good things that's happened in our family and through the work that we have done through the foundation. This September 20, we have traveled back to New York several times on that day, and my mom now is 96 years old, so it's difficult for us to travel with her to New York, especially when there's a time difference of 3 hours. And so we are going to remain in California. We're going to have just a family retreat, very quiet, and we're going to remember everybody. And Jim, I just want you to know that I will be remembering you and your brother as well.
And I will remember your sister.
Yes, thank you. And so it's just going to be a very quiet time for our family.
I think that you bring up a really good point. For the world, September 11th was a public event. But for people that lost members of their family that day, brothers and sisters, it is a very private event. And
Yes.
I'm sure that you miss your sister every day, not
Yes.
just on 9/11. You miss her for so many reasons. You miss her because you can no longer pick up the phone and call her. You can no longer tell her you love her. You can no longer share your life with her. So,
Yes, we honor her life every day.
yeah.
September 11th, I think that day is now ingrained in the fabric of who I am. So it seems to feel easier, but it's not. That day will never, ever be okay with me. And I love my sister dearly. I miss her every day. And every day we think about doing good things in her name.
I
And
love
that to us is just very healing and peaceful.
I love that. Thank you, Kathy. What about you, Jim? What does the 20th anniversary bring up for you? How are you feeling about it?
It depends on what moment you catch me at.
Okay.
It's 20 years. September 11th, we come together every September 11th, and it's a useful and meaningful way for people to come together and mourn and remember. And 20 years is a nice round number. But I know for me and many other family members, it's just a number. It still hurts. It's just one more day, one more week, one more year that we miss our loved ones. And it's a roller coaster. I can confess to you right now that I feel guilty. I feel guilty because I'm angry again. I'm angry for all the things that Joe has missed.
Yeah.
I'm angry on a very, very selfish level that, for the last few years I've been dealing with elderly parents and sicknesses that Joe would have been around to help me with. And it's a really selfish thing to say, but it's honest. So I miss him and I miss his help. And 20 years feels like, and when I hear, when I see a plane, there's different things that could put me right back in that moment in an instant. I can smell the smoke. I can, it's 20 years, 20 years. I mean, till the day I die, there'll never be a healing.
And Jim, I think it's normal, and I hear it all the time with siblings that are now finding themselves as, with elderly parents, et cetera, and more responsibility. And it's really, they sometimes feel abandoned. They feel like, where's my sibling? They should be walking this journey with me. We're as my friend Elizabeth DeVita Rayburn says, we're parallel travelers in life together. We're supposed to be taking the journey together. So we're going to wrap up, but I want Kathy and Jim, I'd like you to give me one bit of advice. What would you say to somebody that has just recently had a brother or sister die and doesn't know how they're going to survive? What would be one tip or tool or a piece of advice you could give them?
To be patient with yourself, to be patient with others that are trying to reach out to help you, and just know that there is hope. Just be patient with yourself.
Thank you, Kathy.
And for me personally, I discovered when I went to the Tribute Museum that, there was a whole array of how people were affected. It wasn't only family members. It was other people that were in the buildings and there's a whole array of how people were affected. And the one thing that I did notice, I went in there with blinders just as a family member, but it taught me that there is no blueprint, there's no plan on how to grieve, on how to recover. You go at your own pace. There is no normal way to do this. And as Kathy said, be kind to yourself. And I found comfort, as we spoke before, in having a voice and becoming an active participant in this grieving process, where it gave me a little bit of control by volunteering. And I found that was extremely helpful for me.
Well, thanks to both of you for all that you're doing to build awareness for sibling loss, to help other people that have had losses, and to keep your siblings alive, their memories, through the work that you're doing. I know Scott is my guiding light, and I want to assume that Betty and Jim are your guiding lights.
Yes.
Jim, Joe and Betty. Why did I call you by your brother's name? Yes, I think our siblings are our guiding lights. So thank you for all you're doing at this time. And my heart.
Thanks for you and your mom for doing all these sessions. I watch many of them, and they're very helpful.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Kathy. And
You're very welcome.
thanks to everybody that's watching today. If you want to see more of these, as I've said, I've had Jim on my show before. Go to opentohope.com. And for those of you out there that have had brothers or sisters die or family members, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
In the aftermath of 9/11, many organizations came to the fore to help all those touched by the devastation. Tuesday's Children rose among them to help the many kids who lost a parent that day. Today, Tuesday's Children keeps its promise to support those impacted by 9/11. Yet there are others that need our help. Military families who've lost loved ones to the wages of war. Communities recovering from domestic tragedies and acts of violence. TuesdaysChildren.org. Healing for today and tomorrow.
The loss of a loved one can leave you feeling depressed, angry, alone, lost. But you don't have to face this journey on your own. Open to Hope is a free community for anyone who has experienced loss. Find support. Find help. Find hope. Give grief a voice at opentohope.com.